Hi, everyone, and welcome to this new series I'm doing here, Athanasius's On the Incarnation. We're going to walk through this text of On the Incarnation. I'm going to do a series where we're walking through commenting on this text, and I'm going to try to keep the videos to under 5 minutes each, and so that they can just be simple, quick little things if you've got a little time, and they're not meant to. I'm not reading the text to you. This is not meant to be like, oh, I've never read On the Incarnation. I'll just watch these videos. No, these are commentaries. I'm going to walk through the text, explain it as best I understand it. Now, I'm not authoritative in understanding Athanasius or absolute or objective. So I encourage you to challenge what I say and think through it. But generally, the purpose of what I'm doing in these videos here is to walk through specifically Athanasius's On the Incarnation. Now, this is the volume I will mostly be following. For copyright reasons, I'm not going to read through the whole thing. I might bring up one or two little quotes from John Bear's translation. So this is from St. Vladimir's Press. It is in the series Popular Patristic Series. I highly recommend any volume from that series, but this is the one I'm going to be following. It's a small book. It's not very large. Also, even with this volume I have, as small as it is also a Greek English, which means only half of this book is the actual text. So it's very small. This is a very simple read. And we're going to walk through this and just as much as we can cover in less than 5 minutes each time, and then go through the whole thing, however many videos that takes. And it's meant to be a companion. I encourage you to read through this yourself. I'm going to post a link to a free public domain edition of this. It's an older translation, but still worth reading if you can't afford to buy a hard copy of this. Any translation will do as you follow along, especially because due to copyright and my own pride, I'm going to be doing my own translation of the text when I read as much as I can. Sometimes I think John Bear's or another translation might be better, and so I'll use that. But I'm going to be using my own translation where possible. So anyways, without further ado, let's jump into a brief overview of what this text is, and then I'm going to go through just the first section, which is his intro section, and then we'll come back and pick up, kind of get into the meat of things in the next video. Also, like I said, I'm going to try to keep these all under 5 minutes. This video will be a little bit longer because it's the intro video. But then from now on, everything will be less than 5 minutes. So, what is this book about? On the Incarnation. What is this? So, for the first bit, you might be wondering too, who is who is Athanasius of Alexandria? What is that about? I'm going to try to have a link there as well, so you can go to a video where I introduce Athanasius as well in another playlist. So he wrote On the Incarnation in a two-part work. This is actually the second part, so it's not that this is two parts in itself. There is actually another book that was written that's meant to be read together with this. We're not going to go over that. That first book is called Contra Gentes, or Against the Gentiles, or Against the Heathen, however you translate that. The main purpose of that book is largely an apologetic type work, responding to the pagan culture around him and showing the futility and problems with it. And basically summarized is paganism is wrong. But then we come to On the Incarnation, where he turns around and now is explaining Christianity. So first he says paganism is wrong, and then he turns and says Christianity is right. And he kind of gives a brief summary of the foundation of what Christianity is about. What are the foundational beliefs? What are the things that we hold to? And why is this important? And so basically, it's on the incarnation. The incarnation, the word made man, is the central facet and the foundational element of the Christian faith, that God has become man and God is triune and all this stuff. And these are the things that Christianity revolves around and depends upon as the most essential elements of our faith. And that's what Athanasius walks through and explains how that's the case. So when did he write this? So briefly, I settle with around 330, or at least I believe it was in the early years, shortly after he became a bishop, the Bishop of Alexandria, which happened in the year 328. Other scholars will disagree with that and place it later or earlier. So, just so you know, I'm settling with around 330. So, as I said too, this is not just about the incarnation per se. In our modern ways of thinking about things, there are some modern critiques about Athanasius that he just talks about the incarnation. He doesn't talk about the crucifixion or anything. Okay, if you actually have read this, you cannot actually say Athanasius didn't talk about the crucifixion or the importance of it. He includes it. The incarnation is just God became man and all that that entails, and he explains that in broadly. So for Athanasius, the whole notion of God becoming man was not just, this isn't a book about Christmas, of the birth of Christ, the initial incarnation. This is about the reality that God has become man and everything that that entails. That's what he's trying to do here. But he does it briefly. So it's not, he could have written a massive volume on this, which Athanasius did write more works where he does flesh out more of this. Anyways, also through this, the main emphasis is what is called the economy of salvation, the workings of what God has done to bring salvation to the world. And that also is summarized for Athanasius in his commonly quoted phrase, God became man so that man might be made divine. Now, that does not mean man becomes gods or we become little gods or we become God. No, that's not what Athanasius is talking about. He's talking more along the lines of we are brought into the fullness of what we are, and we are the image of God. And so, what does that mean except that there is a divinity that we are being drawn into? Not that we are worshipped, but that where there is a grandeur and a divine nature that we are destined to, that God meant for us, that sin has prevented us from. And that's what Christ has come to reestablish, to recreate that. And so, without further ado, then, let's move into this text. Now, he begins this text, the whole book, with briefly summarizing the first volume, Against the Gentiles. Just basically saying what we said before. And, I countered the notion of the idols. They are foolishness and all the pagan rituals and what the pagan superstition and all they do. And then he says, now, come now, blessed one and true lover of Christ, let us, with the faith of our religion, relate also the things concerning the incarnation of the Word and expound his divine manifestation to us. So the main purpose here is concerning the incarnation of the Word. Now, this word incarnation in Greek, anthropesis, which is a special word, en, meaning in, anthropesis, comes from anthropos, man or human, in human. That's really that's what the Greek word means, which also our English word incarnation really is a Latin word, incarnatio, which in carnis, in flesh, and that's the same thing. It's in man, that God has been in man. He has become man. And what does that mean? And Athanasius wants to talk about the manifestation, that this has been revealed and manifested to us. And what does this mean? Let's expound this. Let's think about this and wrestle with this. And another reason Athanasius claims is that so that you might be able to know the reason for the bodily manifestation of such and so great a paternal word. So he's not just talking about the person, man, Jesus. He's talking about the reality that this person, Jesus, is the incarnation of the eternal paternal word of God. And what that means, how does that play out? The fact of God being triune, the eternal word, the Son of God, the second person of the Trinity becoming man. And how is that important? And what does that even mean? That this has been revealed to us. We know this because Jesus came and revealed it. God has revealed himself in this way. And so the reason this is such an issue is because God also is non-bodily. God is uncreated, and yet he has become a created being. This is mind-boggling. And so we need to puzzle over this. How and why did God become man? And yes, this is very closely related to Anselm's later volume, Cur Deus Homo, or Why the God Man, or Why God Became Man, which was written about 700 years later. So Athanasius then presents this agenda as his agenda through this book. First, he needs to establish the creation of the world, the creator. Who was the creator and what is creation about? And he largely does this in against the Gentiles. That is a major theme through that book. And he quickly does that in just like a couple paragraphs in the next couple paragraphs in On the Incarnation. So he doesn't spend a whole lot of time with this first important part. But the main reason this is important is to establish who is the creator, because then the problem is creation needs recreating. The people, we are created in the image of God, but we have tainted this image. It needs to be restored. And who can restore a painting or a sculpture that's been damaged, if except the original artist, the original artisan who created the sculpture? And so too, the image of God can only be restored by God himself. And the creation, what is created, can only be restored or recreated by the original creator. And so we establish God as a creator through the word of God that he created. So the word of God is how God created through his word. And so it is then through the word that recreation is possible. The word is the original creator, thus the word is the fitting recreator. And then this is what leads Athanasius into discussing what is called the divine dilemma. What is that about? We'll get into that with the next video. Thank you.